guided by light of the Holy Spirit, that instruct the hearts of the faithful. Grant us in the same Spirit to be ever truly wise, and ever rejoice in his consolation through Christ our Lord.
Amen.
Amen.
Our Lady, Seat of Wisdom.
Pray for us.
St. Thomas Aquinas.
Pray for us.
The Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Well, welcome everyone to this course, which is on logic, which the art and science of correct reasoning. And this is sort of a continuation of our 6-week course that we've already done on just introducing the main divisions, main branches of philosophy. And we didn't cover logic last time, except I mentioned it as one of the divisions. So I'll be offering, doing this course, a 3-week course just on logic itself. And just a housekeeping thing, if you don't know where the toilet is, it's just through there, through the kitchen and straight ahead. There's the toilet's there.
And some tea and coffee if anyone wants a cup of tea.
Thank you, Marie, as well, for organising this evening as well, helping to organise it. Very good. So I'll just tell you what I plan to do. So the course is on Aristotelian logic. I just want to state that to begin with. There is modern logic. If I have time, I might say something briefly about that. But I'm not going to be focusing on modern logic, but just on Aristotelian logic, which is, if you like, the foundation of all logic. And according to the way Aristotle divided the subject, I'll be doing the same. So there are three weeks we'll be devoting to the subject, and the 3 weeks will roughly correspond to the 3 acts of the mind, which I'm going to talk about this evening. But there'll be a bit of an overlap. Tonight I hope to get onto the first and second act of the mind, because I want to devote more time to the third act, which is the most important, and with reasoning and argumentation. But I'll do the subject as it is traditionally taught. But I normally teach this as a semester course, so it's going to be very condensed. So, but we'll see how we go. And I want to make the classes somewhat practical, not only theoretical. So I've got some sheets here which have certain exercises, questions, which we'll go through in class, just to make it more practical. So I might actually give you, maybe that you can. I've made 25 copies. It should be enough. So the sheet is a series of questions. Some of them we won't do, but some of the definitions that you can fill that out if you wish. I will be doing it in class. But the questions mainly in regard to problem solving or some logical problems that we'll go through, and that'll help, I think, make it a bit more practical. As I said, I don't want to make it purely theoretical, because we could do that, but that's not the aim of this course. So logic. So firstly, just the definition of logic, which I've already said, is the art and science of correct reasoning. That's the definition I'm giving. Art and science of correct reasoning. And when we're talking about an art is, according to St. Thomas, right reason about doing something or making something. So logic is an art in that it teaches us how to reason correctly, an art of reasoning. But it's also a science, because a science is a certain knowledge through causes. And logic as a science gives us the causes and principles behind reasoning and what is required to reason correctly. So it's both an art and a science. And when we're talking about correct reasoning, we're talking about we're going to be looking at rules for a correct argument. Because the human mind reasons according to certain rules, which are discovered by logicians. So if we know these rules, we'll be able to attain correct conclusions in an argument. This is the main focus of logic as a science and as an art, is to determine the rules for correct reasoning and argumentation. And another word for an argument is an inference, as I mentioned, an argument or an inference. So we could say that logic teaches us how we ought to think to avoid error in reasoning. And you can see by reason of what I've said there that logic is important for any field of study. Because any field of study requires use of reason. And so it's being called, therefore, in Latin, the art of arts, ars artium, because you need it. You need this art to do any art, or indeed any science, properly speaking. Because we all employ logic, whether we know it or not. But in the art and science of logic, we formally study it in a more formal and systematic way. So, as I said already, I'll be focusing on Aristotelian logic as developed by Thomist philosophers. So I won't be looking at modern logic, but if I have time, I might say something briefly about it. And when Aristotle, I'll just mention briefly, his works on logic are called the organon, which in Greek, an organon is a tool. So that's how we saw logic, as an organon. It's a tool to help you in any study of any science. And the main works of Aristotle that deal with logic, I'll just mention them. I won't talk about them. The categories. Interpretation. Prior analytics. Posterior analytics. And topics. So you can see these works. It's an indication here how important Aristotle was. Just historically, he was the first philosopher to devote so much attention to logic, and so yes, it indicates how important this work, this area of study was for him. The logic has been divided into different types of logic. There's formal logic, and material logic. So what we're going to be doing in this brief course is formal logic. Formal logic deals with the form of thinking, not the content of thinking. So material logic deals with the matter of what is argued. And formal logic deals with the form of the argument. So we're not concerned in this subject, not directly, we're not concerned with the material of the premises of our arguments. Now it's very important, obviously, that these premises are correct, but in logic, in formal logic, we're concerned more with the form of the argument. That makes sure that we observe all the rules of the argument, not so much with the premises. For example, you could have a premise: all Americans all Americans are Republicans. Trump is American, therefore he's a Republican. Now that's true, formally speaking, as a argument, but materially it's incorrect. Like the major premise, the first premise is incorrect factually. But obviously we want both true premises and a correct form of argument. But in formal logic, we're going to be focusing on the making sure we observe the correct form of an argument. We don't break the rules, because there are rules in regard to that have to be observed in formulating an argument. So that's just by way of introduction. So the course, as I said, will be divided into 3 parts. And according to Aristotle, there are 3 acts of the human intellect. So that's why we're going to be dividing into 3 parts. So I'll just state those briefly, and then we'll talk about them in more detail. So the first act is simple apprehension. Second is judgment. Simple apprehension, judgment, and reasoning. So, as I said in my definition, logic is the art and science of correct reasoning, but we don't only look at reasoning, that is what we focus on, argumentation, reasoning, inference, but we have to look at the building blocks of an argument, which are constituted by simple apprehension and judgment, as we'll see. So what does simple apprehension do? Simple apprehension attains the essence or nature of a thing. And then it expresses that essence or nature in a concept. So it attains the essence and nature. Concept or an idea. So in this part of the course, we will look at concepts and ideas, and also we'll look at words. So So according to Aristotle, a concept is a sign of an essence, and a word is a sign of a concept. So we're dealing with signs here, and I'll come back to that in a moment. So concepts and ideas are a sign of an essence, and a word is a sign of an idea. So I'll come back to this in a moment. So I'm just stating it first. What each deals with. So simple apprehension gives you concepts, and then ideas, and then words. So expressed as a concept, then as a word, or as a word. And in this area also we look at definition. Definition is covered under simple apprehension as well. Judgment is the next step. So once we form concepts or ideas and express these as words, we can then move on to judgment, which is obtaining a proposition. As a proposition by composing and dividing. Dividing concepts. So in grammar, it's expressed as a sentence. So, for example, John is tall. This is a judgment expressed as a proposition. And as you can see, John is tall is made up of concepts, John and tall. So that's why judgment comes after simple apprehension. Simple apprehension forms concepts. From these concepts, we can then form a judgment regarding those concepts, and that then can be expressed as a proposition. And in grammar, it's shown as a sentence. So, like John is tall. Obviously, we can make a judgment without expressing it verbally or in writing. But once we express it, we express it as a proposition, which is attained by composing or dividing. And I'll come back to that in a moment. I'm just giving you an outline at this stage, what we're going to be looking at. And then reasoning is the third step, the third act of the mind. And reasoning can also be called an argument. Or another expression, inference, or deduction. So reasoning uses judgments because judgments give rise to propositions. Propositions are then used in an argument. So for example, all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. Yes. This is an argument. And that argument consists of propositions which are formed in judgment. Okay. So you could also see reasoning as a movement from a process of going from what is known to what is unknown. What are known are the premises, what is unknown is the conclusion. So in argumentation, we go from what is known to what is known to what is unknown. The conclusion is said to be unknown. we reason to a conclusion. And the most important form of reasoning or argument is a syllogism. And we're going to be devoting quite a bit of time to this syllogism, which is the main form of inference. And it's a form of deduction. And I'll come back to this. I'm just raising these concepts at the moment. And so I want to devote quite a bit of time to this, because this is, as if you like, the high point of the human act. These other acts of the intellect lead up to reasoning. So, and also under this heading, under this act of the mind, we'll be looking at fallacies, which are a form of argument which seems to reach a conclusion, but which actually doesn't. So it's an erroneous argument. Also called a sophism, from the Greek opponents of Plato and Socrates, who were called sophists, who were apparently wise, but they weren't truly wise. So fallacies are called also sophisms. Okay. So that's just by way of outline of what we're going to do in the course. So tonight I'm going to be looking at simple apprehension and maybe hopefully get a start on judgment as well. Because there's quite a bit to do, but as I said, not much time to do it. Any questions about that? Okay. So we'll look at the first act of the mind in more detail now. So as I said, simple apprehension. So there are two kinds of knowledge: sense knowledge and intellectual knowledge. I think I raised this when we did epistemology, when I taught that. So sense knowledge, intellectual knowledge, and all knowledge that we have in the intellect, all natural knowledge, is derived from the senses. St. Thomas says, nothing is in the intellect which is not first in the senses. So all our knowledge derives initially from sense knowledge. And from that sense knowledge, we derive concepts. As I said, the first act of the intellect derives concepts. So the senses give us singulars or particular things, and the intellect gives us universals. So for example, if I won't dwell on this because it was covered in epistemology, but for example, I see this table with my eyes. I see this particular table. But my intellect forms an idea or a concept. That's another word for universal, concept, or an idea, which is not only of this table, but of tables in general. So I could form the idea table, which applies not only to this table, but all the tables in this room, and indeed any table that exists. Senses give us singular knowledge of singular things, intellect of universals or concepts. And as I said before, simple apprehension derives the essence or nature of a thing and expresses it as a concept. So I attain the essence or the nature of this of a table, and then form a concept table, which then can be expressed by the word table in English. So you're going from thing, which has an essence or a nature, to a concept, to a word. And as I said, a concept is a sign of an essence, and a word is a sign of a concept. So a thing has an essence. I then form a concept by abstracting the intellect, drawing out, if you like, that essence, forming a concept like table or tree, whatever it may be, and then I use a word. And obviously, in English, the word as a sign of the concept is different than, say, in Latin or French or whatever, because by convention we use different words as signs of concepts. But all humans have the same concepts, but they use different words for those concepts, depending on what language. Now, I just want to mention here the process of induction, which Aristotle talks about. So we form concepts by induction, and an induction can be said to be a process that goes from the particular to the universal, or to the general. Now, for example, if we're looking at concepts, we could talk about the formation of universal concepts or ideas. If, for example, we look at particular trees, to the concept tree. So you can see, by going from individual particular trees that we experience with our senses, we then use induction to form a universal concept tree, for example. So we go from the particular to the general or universal. That's the process of induction. We're dealing with concepts, but also we could talk about induction for the formation of principles. So, for example, if I experience 3 men who die, man 1 dies, man 2 dies, and man 3 dies, they all die, I form a principle, a universal principle: all men die, or all men are mortal. Which is what mortal means. So you can see, by experiencing individual cases of men dying, I can form a general principle that all men die. So science obviously uses this all the time. For example, you might boil water at 100 degrees Celsius on a number of occasions. You always find that water boils at 100 degrees Celsius at sea level. So therefore you can form the principle: water boils at 100 degrees Celsius at sea level. You know that by testing individual cases of water boiling. But someone might ask, well, there might be water somewhere on the planet that doesn't boil at 100 degrees Celsius at sea level, because you haven't tested every single amount of water. No scientist can do that, and it's not necessary to do that, because the general principle is derived from the essence being grasped by the intellect, and that essence is unchanging. Water has an unchanging essence or nature. The intellect grasps that and can form a principle that says all water boils at 100 degrees Celsius, or all men are mortal, all men will die. We don't have to kill every single man to find out that all men will die. Yeah. Now that's one way of doing it, but it's not necessary to do that. And in fact, we can talk about perfect and imperfect inference. And imperfect inference. So A perfect inference is if you have, take for example, you have 12 apostles. You examine every apostle and you realize that each of them is a man. So therefore you could say all the apostles were men. That's a perfect inference because you've gone through every single man, every single apostle, and formulated that inference based on an induction, a perfect induction and a perfect inference from individual cases of 12 men, and saying, therefore, all apostles are men. We could do, but there's many cases of imperfect inference, like the one that I mentioned here. All men are mortal. It's an imperfect inference because I haven't killed every man and tested each man's mortality. But still, now obviously perfect inference is, if you like, more exact because we've actually tested every single case. But that's not often possible. Often we have to rely on imperfect inference. But as I said, that's fine because things have set natures and those natures can be understood by the intellect.
So are we talking about the difference between deduction and induction? Are we
Right.
So
yes.
So induction is going from the particulars to the universal.
Yes.
Is deduction the opposite? Going
in a way, yes. I'll mention it. Yes.
Oh, sorry.
So yes. So induction goes from the particular to the universal. When we come to look at the third act of the intellect, which is reasoning or argumentation, in a way that is the opposite. For example, I gave that example, all men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. So the major premise, the first premise is general. All men are mortal. The conclusion is particular. Socrates is mortal. So in reasoning, in an inference which is deductive, we go from the general to the particular, and the major premise is always general. And we conclude to a particular conclusion. So it is like a reverse of induction. But induction has to be undertaken before we can get to deduction, because it's in induction that we form general principles, like all men are mortal. And once we've attained that principle, a general principle, we can then apply it to come to a particular conclusion. So. Right. Okay. We talked about concepts. Yes. I'll just say something briefly here about definition, because Aristotle is very big on definition, and very important. And that's something anyone who's ever engaged in any argumentation with people, often what is missed is a clear definition of what is actually being talked about. I think as logicians, we have to right from the outset try to pin people down to definitions. And this is something when you look at Plato's writings, he began with this. His various dialogues are an attempt to get definitions. And he knew how important this is, and Aristotle, following him, talks about definition. So I'll just mention something briefly about that. So we could say that a definition is a divided concept in a way. So what we mean by a divided concept. So I think I'll cover this a little bit later, or maybe I'll just mention it here briefly. I'll come back to it. A divided concept. So, for example, if we were to give a definition of this is a classic. Man is a rational animal. This is the definition Aristotle gives of man, you can see what's happening here when we're giving this definition. We're dividing the concept man into what constitutes essential, if you like, notes of man, what belongs to man. And the main way we in giving a definition, we divide the concept into a genus and, if possible, a specific difference or inseparable accidents. I'll come back to this in a moment, but animal here is a genus, it's a general class, and rational is specific difference. But I'll come back to this shortly, because in order to understand this, I have to talk about something else first. But so a definition divides the concept, and the reason why we do it is to understand more fully the concept of man. It's only when we can give a definition that we can really say we understand what the subject is of that definition. That's why it's so important to derive definitions. So what we say rational animal is, if you like, equivalent to man. It's sort of just dividing that concept man so we can get a fuller understanding of what man is, what that concept is. I'll come back to that in a moment. Words and signs. Concept and word. So I said that a concept is a sign of an essence, and a word is a sign of a concept. And there are three types of words, or we could say in logic terms, that logicians distinguish. So there are universal words, univocals. So a univocal word is a word, or we could say a sign, because in a way a concept can be univocal as well, because every concept is the foundation of a word. But I'll just use words at the moment, because that's what we're going to be talking about. So a univocal word is a type of sign which stands for the same meaning as applied to different things. For example, bird. The word bird, as applied to a sparrow, hawk, dove. So when we say bird as applied to sparrow, hawk, dove, we're using word in a univocal way. And what we mean by that is only the same meaning of bird is applied to each of these cases. Swallow, a sparrow, hawk, and dove are birds in the same meaning. That's what we can say, they're all birds. It's the same meaning. And that's because they all have the same nature, a bird nature. And that's why we can use univocal words to have the same meaning as applied to different things, because those things have the same nature. And remember, as I said, a concept is a sign of a nature or essence. And most words used in most words that we use are used univocally. That's because we want to clearly indicate, to avoid confusion, when we use this word, we mean this thing, and that we only mean this thing. But there's another use of words which is equivocal. So equivocal words have a different meaning as applied to different things.
Like synodality.
Well, yes. Take for example, bank. The word bank, as applied to a financial institution like Westpac, Commonwealth institution, or the side of a river. Now, there's no similarity of meaning between a bank as a financial institution and as a side of a river. But in English, we do use bank equivocally. So we can use that word equivocally to apply to these two different things. And unless someone was aware of that, they'd be very confused. I'm going to put my money in the bank. Well, you're going to put it on the side of a river? Well, no, I don't mean, I'm using it equivocally here. It actually has a different meaning. I could use bank univocally as well. I could say bank as applied to the Westpac, Commonwealth, National. I'm using bank in the same meaning, applied to different things. But I can use bank also equivocally if I have a completely different meaning as applied to different things. Or we'll look at some of the exercises in a moment, so about that. And the third type is analogical. So analogical words have a primary meaning and related secondary meaning. This is very important, but we don't have time. We could devote a lot of time talking about analogy, which is very interesting, but we won't. But an example that Aristotle gives is healthy, or health. Health. Health as applied to a man. And as applied to, his example is urine, or you could say food, or climate. So we say John is a healthy man. John is in good health. We also say his urine is healthy. Or we say this food is healthy. Or the climate is healthy. Now, when we use healthy there, we're not using it univocally, exactly the same meaning, because John is not healthy in the same way that the food is healthy. And we're not using it equivocally either. They're not completely different in meaning. Rather, there's a primary meaning and a related secondary meaning. So in the case of health, the primary meaning is a healthy man. The secondary, if you like, meaning and a related meaning to man is urine, because urine is a sign of health in a man if he has healthy urine. Or food is healthy because it causes health in a man. Or climate is healthy because it causes health in a man. So the primary meaning, what we call the primary analogate in this case, is health in a man. And the related secondary analogates, for example, health as applied to urine, or food, or climate.
So is that sort of pretty different with different languages? Because, say, different languages might not have the same number of homophones that we have in English and things like that? Would that make a difference?
In terms of analogy, you mean?
Well, I'm just saying, you know, like say the second one, you've got about the bank.
Right.
Well, that's obviously in English, it's like that.
Yes.
But would every language be like that and have several meanings for one word?
I think every language does have it, yeah.
Okay.
One reason we do that because to avoid creating new words. So we use the same word but has sometimes completely different meanings. But every language does that. Yeah.
That's why we have structured sentences as well, so we've got context.
Yes.
So that when we're talking to each other, we're not just throwing out one word and saying bank. And it's like, well, what do you mean by bank?
Right.
You know, like we structure the sentence so that that word is included in the sentence, but you know what I mean by the way that it is structured and in the context of what I'm, you know, what I'm saying.
That's right. That's right. So if I say I'm putting my money in the bank, that obviously gives the context.
I know what you're talking
It's
about.
good.
Yeah.
The bank here means financial institution, yes, rather than the side of a river. Yes. But analogical words are very important in philosophy because, for example, the way we refer to, for example, God and the world around us, we derive our knowledge about God from the world around us, but we have to use analogy to do that because God is not exactly the same as the things in the world around us, but there is a certain similarity. Because, for example, they both have being, but the being of things is used analogically when applied to things of this world and the beings of this world and God, for example. But anyway, that's so it is very important. Yes, analogical words. Now, I just want to let's have a look at that sheet that I gave you. Might sort of touch on what some of these questions briefly. For example, here, number 2, I say classify the following words as equivocal, univocal, or analogical. So, 1, tree as signifying maple and oak. Univocal, right. Ring as signifying the sound of a bell and a piece of jewelry. Equivocal, yeah. There's no similarity of meaning there. Violent as signifying a kind of weather and someone's behaviour. Analogical, right. Because someone's behaviour, violent, we say it's violent because the primary analogate is the weather being violent, in this case. Yes. Or being as signifying good, a God and a tree. Analogical, right. That's the example I gave before. Sport as signifying soccer and basketball. Univocal, right. So you can see the same word is not necessarily always univocal, equivocal, analogical, but it can be used in either of those cases. The same word can be used univocally, equivocally, analogically. It doesn't have to be completely different words. Right. Now, I just want to get on to the next thing, which Aristotle gives a lot of attention to. So they are the categories. They're also called predicaments. So the categories are the ultimate classification in which all things can be placed. So, if you like, ultimate classification. So they're called predicaments because all the categories can be said of a subject. As I say, they can be predicated of a subject. Whatever you predicate of a subject, S is whatever, that predicate must fall into one of these categories, according to Aristotle. So those categories are substance, and 9 accidents. So there are 10 categories. The first is substance, and then 9 accidents. So a substance is something that can exist in itself. An accident is something that can exist only in a substance. So this was discussed when we looked at metaphysics. And so we say Latin has ends in se, being in itself. This has whereas accents have ends in alio, being in another. In other words, accidents can't exist in themselves, whereas substances do exist in themselves. So I am a substance, but the colour of my skin is an accident, or my weight is an accident. So the 9 accidents, I'll just list them briefly, and we can't spend too much time on them. But so it's quantity, quality, relation, quantity, quality, relation, action, passion, where, position, when, possession. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah. So quantity. For example, 80 kilograms. So if someone was 80 kilograms, this is their weight. Or they're 180 centimeters tall. So if I'm a substance, which I am, I exist in myself, I have a certain quantity. For example, my weight and other dimensions. Quality is variously described, but it includes things like habits and dispositions, ability or inability, sense qualities.
Values?
Sorry?
Values?
Values.
Values and beliefs? Does that come in there?
A value, for example, what would be an example of a value you're thinking?
I believe in God, or I value peace.
They're
Right.
more spiritual.
Yeah, so a value, as we would put it, yes, we could put it as a quality. For example, the value of, that's an interesting question. Values, I probably would say, yeah, they're a quality.
So what are the sense qualities, Father?
So the sense qualities are what is derived from the 5 external senses: hearing, touch, taste, smell. So for example, the color of my skin would be a sense quality, or the softness of something. Yeah. These are qualities which inhere in a substance, but they don't exist in themselves.
So if you were saying, Father, that the substance was a man,
yes,
could you do that and then you say all the accidents in relation to that?
yes, that's
So
right.
he was 80 kilograms and he was...
Yeah, John, for example, 80 kilograms. Habit, for example, he could be charitable.
What
Or-
is this one? Like
Or ability, he can run, for example, or he's running.
or he might not be able to see or something. Would that go there too? If he was blind or...
Well, blindness is, it's in the order of, well, blindness is actually not a being, it's the absence of being. But you would put it under inability here. Yeah, the inability to see, yeah, would be an accident. It goes in the accidents. So ability relates to a natural capacity. Yes. But anyway, because of the time constraint, I won't go into more detail here. But usually when we're talking about the accidents of something, usually quality is something which is most noticeable about a thing, like its sense qualities, or also its form or figure is another example. For example, it could be something as curved or rectangular. Yeah. That's related to its form or figure. Or you're looking at a statue, the particular shape it takes. So, relation is an accident which relates to, has a reference of a thing to another thing. For example, father, relationship of father and son, for example. So we call a man a father because he's generated a son. So that's what he has, the accident of fatherhood. Yeah. And a son, because he is generated from the father, has the accident of sonship. Also, we could talk about relations based on quantity. For example, something is equal or unequal. Something is bigger or smaller.
But bigger or smaller than what? You'd have to have two things there.
Yeah. So the nature of a relation is always, it's a form of accident that relates always to something other than itself. Yes. So, so something is equal to something else. Equal has no meaning in itself as an accident unless it's referring to something else, equal to something else. Just like father has no meaning unless there is a son, which is generated by the father.
So does that mean you can have something that's both big and like smaller than something else?
Yes, relative to something else. So,
Like the Dr. Seuss book, the big meets the small, who then meets the big.
right, yes. So, yeah, so I'm bigger than a mouse, but I'm also smaller than an elephant. So we talk about bigger, smaller, equal, unequal, etc. Action, passion, for example, the action of cutting wood, for example. Cutting, or passion being cut. So if I'm chopping wood, I have the accident of cutting. The wood has the accident of being cut, which is a passion. We use the passion of Christ, for example. Our Lord undertook the passion because he suffered something being done to him. So that was a passion.
Excuse me, Father, is that related then to when we talk about, like, in the spiritual life, the passion, so like anger and fear, is that related to that, or is this a different concept?
Well, they're different, although
Emotions.
passion means having, in this sense, being something being done to someone.
Undergoing,
Yeah,
to undergo something.
undergo something, yes.
Yeah.
It's not talking
So
about
you could say the passions, the soul is undergoing something through the passion as well, because there are concupiscible and irascible appetites which undergo certain things, like anger. Like the irascible appetites give rise to a passion of anger.
Yeah, like a feeling, a mood that comes on, we
Yes.
kind of struggle with.
Right. Where, for example, in Albury, so I'm a substance who is in Albury at the moment, and that's an accident for me. I could change my location, and I would change my subject, my accident of where. Position, for example, sitting or standing, that's an accident. When, yes, for example, at 8 p.m., for example. And possession is a particular accident dealing only with humans, according to Aristotle, and it includes things like clothing. So he includes clothing as an example of a possession. He thinks clothing is only for men, for humans, but we know dogs are also clothed. But Aristotle thinks it's something a possession is strict. When he uses the word, it's something belonging, possession of a man, of humans. Okay. We might just have a look at these questions just briefly. So number 3 there, 3b, stating which category each of the following primarily belongs. Primarily, sometimes they could belong to more than one category, but 5 kilograms. Quantity, right. Thinking. Action, yes. Action. Well, actually, yes. What did I put here? I put there.
Could be action and passion here.
I think here, what I've got, 3b. I've actually put as a quality here because it's actually thinking is something. I didn't go through this, but it's something intransitive. It doesn't pass into something else. So when we're talking about action, the action has to be transitive, has to pass into something else. So thinking is an imminent operation. So it actually comes under ability because it's intrinsic. It doesn't pass over outside the subject. So thinking is a quality. Marble. No. Substance, right. Marble is a substance. Athletic. Quality, yes. And that would fall under ability. Yeah, someone's athletic.
With thinking, Tyler, so you would say that running is an action, correct?
No. Well, that's also imminent. Because it doesn't pass over into something outside.
Okay.
Or swimming, for example, as well.
So these are qualities, not actions.
Because it actually has to pass over to something which suffers something being done to it. Like cutting bread or chopping wood. Or
It requires an object.
Couldn't you say that with running you are technically then, because you're like putting pressure onto the ground?
In a certain sense, yes. Logicians normally would regard that as quality.
Is it because it's like you're not whatever you're running on isn't being ran, but like when you're cutting wood, the wood is being cut.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, that's a good point. Running or being run. We don't say that, although we do say cutting and being cut. Sowing and being sown. Hitting and being hit. Contemplative, number 5. Quality, yes. It would be, in fact, a habit, as a sort of a virtue. Virtues, in fact, are habits. So virtues fall under the axiom of quality. And habits are stable dispositions, as opposed to dispositions simply, which are transient disposition. So habits are stable dispositions. Watering? Action, yeah, because watering, something being watered. Yeah. Rectangular? Quality. Form. It's a form or figure of something. Fatter. Relation, yeah. Yes. Because it's comparing you to something else. John is fatter compared to, Sam or something. Was cut. Passion, right. Next year. When? Crowned. Passion, right. Kneeling. Position, yeah. Digging. Action, yeah. On the table. Where? Position is actually we're talking about position is the posture of something. Whether I'm sitting, standing, on my head, whatever. Whereas where is not the posture, it's the location of something. It says located at a place.
So would that mean flying is a position, or no? Is that...
No.
No? Okay.
Flying would be, I would say, a quality, ability.
Because you can't be flown.
No.
But you'd say in a
An aeroplane
plane.
can be flown, though.
Yeah.
Couldn't it be
You'd say in a
action?
plane, couldn't you?
Sorry?
You'd say that you were in a plane.
I flew the plane.
Flying in a plane, yeah. But the plane is not,
Well, yeah.
we say the plane is being flown. Flying and being flown.
I'm in mid-air.
So think about that. Flying. See, flying is not, really transitive, is it? It's not passing over into something else.
Like driving the car.
It's like
Acting
cutting.
on the
Isn't it
car.
just another action, though? Flying?
Sorry?
Isn't it another action? You're a pilot and you're flying.
But it's not, as I said, in terms of logic, it would say there has to be some transitive action that affects something outside oneself, like cutting wood and being cut. So I would tend to say it's quality. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Right. I'll just say something now about the next thing Aristotle talks about. So we talked about the categories. Now he refers to something called predicables. So the predicables are how the predicate is related to the subject. So you've got a sentence, S is P. Now we'll come back to this. S stands for subject, P for predicate. So the predicables are how P is related to S. Yes. So how the predicate is set of X, or how it's related set of S. How P is set of S. What's the relationship between P and S? And according to Aristotle, there are 5 predicables. So it could be a genus, specific difference, species, property, an axiom. Yeah. So, genus is a general class of things. General class. Specific difference is something which is peculiar to something. It has to be peculiar to the subject. So here, definition here. Yes, it's the identifying characteristic, making a thing to be a special kind of thing within a class. So, I'll put here identifying characteristic. So, for example, that example that I gave before, if I say man is a rational animal, if man is the subject here and the predicate is rational animal, how does rational animal relate to man? According to Aristotle, it's a specific difference. It's what distinguishes man from every other thing. And that is, he has reason. So the specific difference as a predicate is what is unique to that thing, to that subject. Now, we don't always know what the specific difference is of a thing, but sometimes we do. We'll look at those questions in a moment as sort of an indication of some of these examples. Species here means a special kind of thing. So, for example, man is a species. Now, in this case here, when I've given this definition here, probably I should have, this is a predicate, rational animal. But in this predicate, there are two words here, animal and rational. Rational would be the specific difference. And animal would be the genus or the general class. So, as I mentioned before, when you're giving a definition of something, you would normally give the genus and specific difference, if you know it. So, man is a rational animal. So there are two predicables used in this predicate. The genus, animal, and the specific difference, rational. And man here would be...
drill down more into some species of man as well.
Well, Aristotle doesn't think there are species of man, but you could, in a way, see, there are species in the biological sense, but in the logical sense there are. Because you talk about a general genus, man, and species under man, as opposed, as general types of men, for example, Asians. So in a loose sense, you could say that in a logical sense. Property is a characteristic which is peculiar to a special kind of thing. So it's not an identifying characteristic, but it is a peculiar characteristic. For example, the fact that water boils at 100 degrees Celsius at sea level is a property of water. And a lot of chemicals have particular properties, yes, that are unique to them. Aristotle gives the example, risibility of man. Man can laugh. He thinks that's a property of man that flows from his rational nature. And an accident, we've already talked about the accidents before, those 9 accidents. Some of these accidents are separable, some are inseparable, but anyway, I won't distinguish that for the moment. So if you look at that exercise that I gave, it just asks, using the 6 categories. Now, I say 6 predicables because you can actually divide accident into separable and inseparable. Separable means it's not always found with a thing, whereas inseparable means the accident is always found with a thing. Separable and inseparable. Obviously, for example, the colour of something, say whiteness, as applied to a white male and a white table, it's a separable accident because men don't have to be white; they can be dark in skin. Whereas some accidents are peculiar to the thing, to things. For example, as far as I know, a platypus has a sort of a spoon-shaped snout, which is found only in platypuses. So that would be an inseparable accident. As soon as you saw that snout on an animal, it's only found on platypuses.
So does accident apply to stuff like something being metal and something being wood? What is that?
No, that's in the order of substance difference. Yeah, they're different substances.
In a way, you could say inseparable accidents are peculiar characteristics, couldn't you?
Peculiar, separable. No, separable, inseparable. Did you say?
Yeah.
Inseparable. Right. Yes, they're particular, or they may not be only found in that thing, but they're always found in that thing. For example, whiteness is found in many different types of things, for example, but as I said, some accident like the shape of the snout of a platypus would be something always found with platypuses and inseparable from platypuses. Right, if you look at the examples that I've got there, number 4. So you've got to say, name the way in which each predicate is related to its subject. In other words, which predicable does it fall under, the predicate. So the soup is hot. Property, do you think? It would, in fact, accident, a separable accident, because soup does not always have to be hot. It could be cold soup. So it's not a property. It's clearly an accident, and it's a separable accident because it could be cold soup. The equilateral triangle has 3 equal sides.
Inseparable. Property.
Specific difference.
Specific difference, yes, good, yeah. It's the identifying characteristic. No other geometrical figure has 3 equal sides, 3 equal angles. Only an equilateral triangle. So it's unique to that thing. So it's a specific difference.
Could it also be inseparable?
No, because it's beyond. It's more than an accident. It's something unique to it. Yeah, and accidents aren't unique in that case. Yeah. Fido is a bull terrier.
Specific.
Species, yes. Species. It's a special kind of thing. So Fido, bull terrier, is a particular kind of dog in this case. So it would be species. So what have I got here? Yes. Man can construct languages. Property, yeah. It's a peculiar characteristic to man, not found with any other substance or any other thing on earth. The duck has feathers. No, not specific difference. Because there are other birds that have feathers, not only ducks. So, so it would be inseparable accident, because ducks always have feathers, but it's not peculiar only to ducks. So it would be an accident, but a separable accident, inseparable accident. Sorry, because feathers are always found with ducks. The oak is a tree. So it's actually a genus, yes. Tree is a genus, and oak is a species or kind under that genus. Yeah. So remember, yes, because genus is a general class. So if tree is the general class, and then you have under that general class species of trees, like oak, maple, eucalyptus. 7, the bear is...
Sorry, Father, but you said the oak is a tree, so you've already specified at the start the oak, what it is, that it classifies as a tree.
Right. So the predicable here is how does... What the question is, how does tree relate to oak? So what's the predicable of tree? And remember, predicables are how P relates to S. So how is tree related to oak?
So
It's a genus under which...
Shouldn't have been written the other way around.
The tree, isn't it?
The tree is an oak.
No,
No.
No, then
So that would be correct.
the subject is the oak.
The subject is oak. Yeah.
So the subject
What
comes
can be
first.
said about the subject is what you're getting at.
Yeah. The predicate is what is said about a subject. And what is said about the subject here is that it's a tree, and tree is a genus in relation to oak. The bear is a carnivore.
Specific.
Would have been inseparable.
Separable.
Actually.
Is it a specific
No.
difference?
Specific difference.
No, because bears, to be a specific difference, it has to be such that being carnivore is only found in bears as a subject. That's not. There are many things that are carnivores. So genus would be a genus. Carnivore would be genus in relation to bear, because there are many types of carnivore is a general class, and under that you have different things which are different species which are carnivores, which includes bears.
Father, if you change the number 6 to the tree is an oak, would that make it a species?
Would make oak a species.
Would that relate to species? If you said instead of the oak is a tree, you said the tree is an oak.
Oh, right, okay.
Would that change it to be a species?
Right, so in that case, yeah, the oak would be a species or kind of tree. So oak in relation to tree then would be a species, yeah.
Of the genus.
Of the genus tree, yeah. John is a man,
General.
so man in relation to John.
Genus.
Species. Species, it's a special kind of, man in relation to John, man is a species, man is species in relation to John. So, oxygen is flammable.
Would that be an inseparable accident?
I would say inseparable accident, yeah. Because there are many things that are flammable, like hydrogen, etc. But flammability is always found with oxygen being flammable, so therefore it's an inseparable accident. And then the ground is wet. Separable accident, yeah. Because it could be dry, could be wet. Doesn't have to be wet. Yeah. Okay. Right. Now I was just going to say something briefly about the. Well, I was going to say something about the Tree of Porphyry, but I might just say something briefly about that. Porphyry was a philosopher, 4th century philosopher, who was a commentator on Aristotle, and he devised this tree which shows the hierarchy of universality of concepts. So you have substance as the first, supreme genus, he calls it, or the supreme general class of things. And then substance can be a body or spirit. A body can be animate or living or inanimate or mineral, we could say. And then animate bodies can be sentient or animal, let's say they have senses, or plants. Sentient things can be men or brute animals, non-rational animals. And then man can be then individual men under that, like Peter, James, and John. So you can't go below this. These are called infimes species. That's the lowest level you could go on the Tree of Porphyry, individual things. So you can see it's a way of dividing concepts in a hierarchy. So this is a genus in relation to body and spirit, which are species under substance. But then body is in turn a genus in relation to animate and mineral, things that have life and things that don't have life, living, non-living. And then animate is a genus in relation to things which have sensate animals or plants. And then sentient is man and brute. Yeah. And under man you have individual men. This was a very important sort of insight of Porphyry, which is it shows that how concepts are arranged in a hierarchy, and using what we use, genus and species. So in logic, genus and species are more fluid than in say the way it's used in biology, for example. This is a genus in relation to this, which are species under that genus, but this can be a genus in relation to this. So depending on what you're comparing the things to. Right. That covers what I wanted to say basically about that first operation of the intellect. I was hoping to start on judgment, but you probably may have to leave that until next week, maybe. We're out of time. Are any questions about that?
Goes quickly.
Yeah, so when you were talking about predicables, were they a type of relation when you were talking about the classifications? Would they be a type of relation of subjects, or so falling under the categories of the ultimate classification, like where you listed the 9 accidents, and there was relation, and then you talked about predicables. Would predicables be a type of relation?
No.
No? Okay.
No, well, as a type of predicables indicate how this predicate relates to the subject. So in that sense, it is talking about a relation, how P relates to S. So P can be a genus in relation to S, or it could be a specific difference in relation to S.
Okay.
Yeah. So it does talk about a relation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just on concepts, what does Aristotle say about the spiritual nature of concepts? Like they're rooted in material things, but they can only be known by spiritual beings.
Right. Well, this is an argument he gives why we have a rational soul, in fact, because the fact that we know, we think using concepts which are immaterial indicates that the soul is immaterial, because there's a principle agere sequitur esse. The way something acts is the way it follows from the way it exists. So the fact that we can use concepts indicates that we must be also spiritually material. That's the main argument for a spiritual soul, in fact, that he gives.
But don't animals also use concepts?
No.
Don't they in a way, don't they use concepts though?
They use images, but they wouldn't use concepts. So they would have receive impressions from their senses, and they would form images of those impressions, but they don't form ideas. So this is one reason why they don't have they don't have an immaterial soul, only material soul, because they can't go that next step in forming concepts, which involve a higher degree of abstraction.
Hypothesizing, is that the same as hypothesizing? Like we can experience something and then kind of base our experience of that and, hypothesize about a future event or whatever.
Right.
But a dog can't do that. It will
No.
only use its experience.
Right. Yes, it has. A dog has an experience of things, and it has a memory of those experiences. It forms images of them, and it also has one of the interior senses is the estimative sense, which is a type of sense in which it uses those images, and in a primitive type of reasoning, but it's not reasoning properly speaking. It's something instinctual. So for example, a dog, for example, a sheep knows by the estimative sense that a wolf is harmful to it. It doesn't actually formulate that as a conclusion of a reasoning process. It forms images of wolves, for example, and by an instinctual way, it knows that a wolf is harmful to it.
See, we don't talk enough about this because it's part of the reason why evolutionary biologists want to give off the impression that animals have languages and that they reason and concept. Because by doing that, you sort of subconsciously prove that there's no spiritual difference between man, made by God, for himself, and animals which are made for man.
Right, that's right, yes. Because if man is simply just another animal, maybe a more highly developed one, but one who doesn't have an immaterial soul, then yes, you could say dogs have concepts as well, and use concepts and reason. But we want to make clear that men have different natures than brute animals. They are, as Aristotle gives that definition, rational animals. They have reason. Yes. All right. There was quite a few things here. Now, we didn't get onto judgment, but anyway, there were, as I said, 3 parts, 3 acts of the mind. So next week we will look at judgment. if you want, you can take some of these questions home if you like and try to figure out some of these things, but you may have difficulty doing it before I explain what it's about. But maybe we'll finish with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you,
Thank you, Father.
Thank you.